All right, so but what was I going to say? But he had, but Henry Kissinger was the one who presented him with the award. Wasn't there because he's now, really not in good health. And it was tough because, he's still obviously, cognitively is there, but physically he's really struggling. So every word, was a struggle to see him to get through. But overall, I mean, it was, but I think myself, Neil, and Richard were the only people wearing masks by far. Like, the entire room, we looked like we were complete outer space, because it's a very different crowd. Hanley came too. Yeah. Well, I think they've struck up a bit of a relationship,
He wasn't at the board.
Yeah, that's exactly what. Oh, yeah. Actually, after this is over, fill me in on that because nobody. Usually when it comes to board meetings, if I'm not there, no news is good news to me, but at the same time, good.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot, I gave my few. The income is not glorious, but.
No, I know, but there's, yeah.
They talked a little bit, well, they didn't talk later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you and me will catch up because we gotta catch up on a few things. All right, so, sorry, I talked your ear off. You got in here, didn't let me tell us on,
I think Benzie's coming.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. Yeah, I think, I was told that basically after 9 o'clock, the rain at least was supposed to stop. So.
You mean today?
Yeah, today. Yeah.
Well, even last night it lightened up.
Yeah,
I went over to my brother's to bring chicken soup at a holiday.
That was nice.
So they were going out. I says, Harry, you can't take him out tonight. I couldn't see driving over.
Yeah, well, that was my concern. That was exactly my concern.
6:30, at 6 o'clock going home.
Yeah.
It lightened up.
Right.
You did the right thing.
No, I think it was. I mean, look, you always question it, but I think in the end, and this, especially this time of year, just better not to take the risk.
It was so hard driving for me.
Yeah, no, well, because the truth is out here, especially on the back roads or anywhere where it's not lit, if there's cloud cover, you really can't see anything,
Absolutely.
And then everybody's high beams these days are either on or just the regular lights, so half the time you're just blinded. It's no, that's why I try to avoid driving at night as much as I can. I completely understand that. It is a challenge at this time of year for sure. The kids adjusted to it better than I thought they would. I was expecting the worst, but somehow or another, I think we lucked out on that. They at least sleep till 6 these days, so I'll take it.
Did they sleep this morning?
Did they sleep this morning? It's a good question. Shabbos morning is always a bit of a rush, one way or the other.
How was your little guy doing?
Oh, he's great. I'll show you after we're done. I'll show you videos because yeah, no, I mean he's he got over his thing, Eva got over his thing, but his walking is the main thing that he's been working on. So he was at the playground yesterday.
Is it good?
I got he walked for about a minute and a half straight, and he was bending down, picking up leaves, throwing them up in the air and stuff like that. So once you're at that point, then it's just sort of realizing that he can do it whenever he wants to, but he's starting to walk around more at home from here to there and all that stuff. So, he's a very sweet guy, got a big personality,
Wow.
Yeah. I hope his blonde curls stick around, In my family, I'm told a lot of times it starts out that way and then it goes to, yeah. Yeah, but who knows? He might buck the trend. We'll see. All right. Speaking of things we're grateful for, we'll start our service on page 186. Modeh Ani at the very top of the page. Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Ani lefanecha modeh ani lefanecha. I offer thanks to you, Adonai, ever living sovereign, that you have restored my soul to me in mercy. How great is your trust. We'll turn now to page 192, the very top. Mahatovu Ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tohu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 194. We'll read together in Hebrew at the very top of the page, a blessing for our bodies. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah. Varavo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. Galui v'yadua lifnei chisech vodecha, she'im yipatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, yefshar lihitkayem v'la'amod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai rofech kol basar, umafli la'asot. Now on page 196, very top of the page. Elohai neshama shenatata b'tehorahi. 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 We'll join together at the bottom of page 197. My soul came to me pure, drawn from the reservoir of the holy. All the time it remains within me, I am thankful for its thirst for compassion and justice. When my eyes behold the beauty of all creatures, let my hands know the privilege of righteous deeds. Baruch atah Adonai asher b'yado nefesh kol chai v'ruach kol b'sarish. For eyes and body are spirit, as we turn to page 198, and we welcome Betsy. Good Shabbos, buddy. It's great to see you. All right. Betsy, just if you need, again, there are more comfortable chairs in the office if you want to bring one out there. Howard's got the key. Yeah, by all means, and if you have any trouble getting around, maybe Howard, we can help out, or we can pause this and help. Yeah, just be comfortable. Let me know what we can do. Okay, page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasachli bina lavchin me'ov v'layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach bibrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechin mitzadei gaber. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten le'aev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavir sheina me'enai u'tnuma me'al papai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani ben chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael b'tifarav. Please be seated. We're now on the bottom of page, or middle of the page, 205, second reading down from the very top. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. Blessed is Adonai, teacher of Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. Page 206 at the very top. Evu devarim shehin lahem shiur, she'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh, ve'al keren kayemet lo le'olam haba, ve'elu hen kipud ahavaim u'gmilut chasadim, ve'hashkamahat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'arabit, והכנסת אורחים וביקור חולים, והכנסת כלה ולוויית המת ועיון תפילה, והבאת שלום מן אדם לחברו, ותלמוד תורה כנגד כולם. Okay, we'll rise in body or in spirit as we turn to page 212 for the opening blessing of Pezukei de Zimra. Baruch shehamar v'haya haolam baruch hu, Baruch oseh bereshit, Baruch omer ve'oser, Baruch gozer u'mekayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov lireav, Baruch haylad v'kayam lanetzach, Baruch bohodeh u'matziel, Baruch shemo, v'ishpachot u'vizmirot negadelcha, u'nshabechecha nafercha v'nazkir shimcha v'namlichecha malkeinu Eloheinu, yachid chei ha'olamim, melech meshubach u'mufoar deyat shemo hagadol, Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal batishpachot. Please be seated. We're now on page 214. Tov lehodol Adonai, Tov lehodol Adonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon, Tov lehodol Adonai, lehagid baboker chastecha, lehagid baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha b'halelot, ve'emunatcha b'halelot, tov lehodot l'Adonai, alei asur v'lenabel, alei gayon v'chinor, כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך רענן. מגענו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מגענו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מגענו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. סלח תסלח. ואנחנו נברך ים, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה, 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 hallelujah, hallelujah. Great start to our Shabbat. So Nice to see everybody. We're on page 218, 150th Psalm at the very top of the page. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekocho, hallelujah, Birkia Uzo, hallelujah, Big Burotav, hallelujah, Kero Kudo, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 beteka shofar, hallelujah, benevel bechinor, hallelujah, betofu machol, hallelujah, bevinim beruga, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 Betziatzalei Shamam, hallelujah, Betziatzalei Trua, Kol Hanshama Tehallelujah, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Nishmat kol chai, tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu, k'tiseli. We're now on page 220 at the very top of the page. Ilufinu maleh shira kayam, ulshoneinu rina kamon galav, vesivtotenu shevach kemarchevei rakia, veinenu meirot kashemesh vechayareach, veyadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim, Veraglenu kalot kayanot, ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha, Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Eimotenu, K'tisanu We're on page 222 in the middle of the page. Shochenad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatu ranenu tzadikim b'Adonai la'yesharim na'avat tehilah v'fi yesharim tihalalu divrei tzadikim Titbarach u'bilshon chasidim, titromamu v'kerev kedoshim, titkadashu ma'kehalot, ribebotam chabeit Yisrael berinah yitbar, Shimcha Malkeinu bechol dor, Vador Yababai, Yababai, Bye, 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 Yababai, Yababai, Bye, Bye, Yai, Bye, Bye, Yai, Bye, Bye, Yai, Bye, 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 Ay, ay, bye, bye, ay, bye, bye, ay, bye, bye. Whereas in body or in in spirit as we turn to page 223 for the concluding blessing of Sukkot Zimra. Remain standing through the Chatzi Kaddish on the Baruch Hu on the pages after that. Yishtabach Shimacha Alad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol HaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Lecha Na'e Adonai Eloheinu Elokei Avoteinu Ve'imotenu Shir Mishpachal V'Zimra V'Zumemshala HaNetzach Gedula U'Gvura Tila V'Tiferet Kedusha U'Malchut Brachot Me'Hodot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Baruch Atah Adonai El Melech Gadol B'Tishbachot El HaHodot Adonai Niflot Abocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech Elchei Haolamim Yitkadal V'Yitkadash Shemei Rabam Ve'almad Yibrach V'Rutei V'Yamlich Malchutei V'Chaychon V'Yomechon Chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael B'Gala U'Bizman Kariv V'Yimeru Amen Yeshmei Rabam Mevarach Ve'Elham Li'al Ve'Almayah Yiparach V'Yishtabach V'Yitvar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh V'Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei Dekuchav Leila Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tushbechata V'Nechamata Damiran Be'alma V'Yimeru Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Please be seated. We're now on page 228. Let's read together in English at the bottom of the page and then the 3 lines of Hebrew just above. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy, you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness, you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai, in wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created, may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir. Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir. V'nizkechu lanu meheira le'oro. V'nizkechu lanu meheira le'oro. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. Now on page 230, we begin by reading together in English at the top of the page and then the Hebrew towards the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. V'ha'ereneinu b'toratecha v'dabek libeinu mitzvotecha v'yached levabeinu le'ahava u'lira et shemecha v'lo nevosh v'lo nikalev v'lo nikashem le'olam va'ed yiveshem kodshecha hagadol v'hanora b'tachnu nagila v'nismecha b'yeshuatecha v'havienu le'shalom. May our ארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו. יהל פועל ישועות, אתה ובנו בחרת, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת. להודות לך יחדך באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ושוכבך וקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Page 236. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית על כנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Okay, we're now on page 238, last 4 lines in Hebrew towards the bottom of the page. תהילות לעליון ברוך ומבורך משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, דור התהילות אוסף אליהם, שיר החדשה שיבחו גאולים, לשמך שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל, ובדי חלומך יהודה בישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל. We'll begin the Amidah together on page 242 and then continue silently from there. As always, please go at your own pace, and when you're finished, if you're standing, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Very good. Very good. I was anticipating. Sorry, one step ahead of me. 300,
You got it?
324. Very good. So I know you just got cozy. You're welcome to stay again. Rise in body or spirit. Repetition of the Amidah, page 324. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh HaKol, V'zocher Chastei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevihu la lifnei b'neihem, L'man Shemo v'Yahvah, Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Abraham Bezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai Mechayei Metim Atarav Leoshiach Mashiv Haruach Morin Hagashem Mechakel Chaim Bechesed Mechayei Metim Berachamim Samech Noflim Verapech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Amar Ichamo Chabal Gifurot Umido Melach Melech Memit Umechayeh Umahatzmiach Yeshua V'leman Atah L'chayot Mitim Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayeh HaMetim. We're on page 326. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, keshem shema pishim oto mishmim arom, kakatuv hayad neviecha, ekar hazel seve amar, kadosh, 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 Adonai tzeva'ot, meloch haaretz, kevodo. Adir, Adirenu Adonai, Adoninu Madir, Shimecha B'kol haaretz, Baruch Kevod Adonai Bimkomo, Echad Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu Ve'hu Yashmienu, V'rachamav Le'enei Kol Chai, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai Leolam, Elohai Zion, Ledor Vador, Hallelujah. Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Nagid God Lecha, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador Nagid God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim Kedushatcha Nagdish, kedushatcha nahakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush, le'olam le'olam. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Please be seated. We're now at the top of page 329. Yismechu v'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Aha mekache shiri Shabbat. Kulam yismeu v'yitangu mitu v'chashabat. Yismechu v'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi'i ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat, Chemnat yamim oto kerata Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Zecher lemase bereshit Shabbat. Zecher lemase bereshit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Eloheinu, Eloi Avotenu, Imotenu, Retzei, V'imnuchateinu. Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'ten l'chelchenu v'toratecha. Sahabeinu mitumecha, v'samechenu yeshuatecha, v'taher libeinu, le'ovdecha be'emet, v'hanchileinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ayin, 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 V'yahava ratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'nukuva Yisrael mekadshe shemhecha. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. We'll turn now to page 330. We'll read together in English in the middle of the page. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves, and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levatcha bira navod. Let's read together on page 332, beginning at the bottom of the page. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations, modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulechanai lehodot. We're now on page 334. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed merachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha, Barcheinu yotzreinu kulanu kechad, ve'or panecha, ki be'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed merachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha, tarat chaim ve'ahavat chesed, u'tzedaka uvracha verachamim b'chaim v'shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed verachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha, v'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol eit u'b'chol shah b'shlomecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed verachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha. Baruch atah Adonai, mevarech et amo Yisrael v'shalom. Let's read together on the bottom of page 336. I need strength, humility, courage, patience, strength to control my passions, humility to assess my own worth, courage to rise above defeats, patience to cleanse myself of imperfections, and wisdom to learn and live by our sacred teachings. Let me not be discouraged by my failings. Let me take heart from all that is good and noble in my character. Keep me from falling victim to cynicism. Teach me sincerity and enthusiasm. Endow me with perception and courage that I may serve others with compassion and love. Ose shalom b'mromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Good Shabbos, everybody. Shabbat shalom. So we're at Parshat Vayera, which in the plowed chumash, the one looks like this. And Ellen, when I saw you grabbing books before, I think you may have grabbed one of our old Torahs, which has a different page number. But it is an older one, but I can tell you chapter and verse, or Marcia, who jumps to the rescue. Thank you, Marcia. So we're going to be on page 123, 123, very convenient numbering system. So Ellen, when you get that there, you'll be on 123 most likely. Or if you're in the women's commentary, we're on page 87. We're going to read in a little bit what would be the first 14 verses of the Parsha. But this, of course, is a very, very significant Parsha, more often than not thought of really for only one part of it, the very end part of it, which is what story?
Sodom.
Say that again?
Sodom.
Say one word?
Sodom.
Well, yes, Sodom. Oh, very good. So Howard is a learned guy. This big chunk in the middle that's quite important as well. Story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, absolutely. But what's at the very, very end of the Parsha? Think Rosh Hashanah day 2.
Isaac.
Very good. Very good. Akedat Yitzchak. Poor Isaac, not the best ending of the parsha for a lot of us. But we discussed it at Rosh Hashanah, and then we come back to it. As I sort of remarked, I think on the holiday, we come back to it very quickly afterwards. We'll talk about it a bit more in Torah study, but I wanted to actually focus on what is one of the more special parts of the story in the beginning of the parsha, which we tend to skip over, which is this story of Abraham and Sarah welcoming in these three, what we are told, malachim. We don't quite know exactly in the Hebrew what they are, what are later described to be angels, but messengers, three people, each of which bringing different messages, and one of which particularly relevant to Sarah, which is telling her that even though she is, by all accounts, past the age in which a woman would generally bear a child, she is told that she will, in fact, have a child. And part of her response of sort of laughing at the absurdity of it becomes the basis for the name of her child, Yitzchak. The Hebrew root in the middle means basically to laugh. So there is sort of this really interesting interaction. But I wanted to focus on one element of it in particular here, and then we'll discuss more in Torah study, which is this conversation about who are these malachim, right? Who are these messengers? Who are these people that come? So let's establish, first of all, what's happening here. And then I'll bring a teaching from a colleague of mine who I adore and who is from a very different mindset than me and is much more attuned, I think, to speaking about angels than I tend to find myself. So we'll start with the text itself. I'm going to read from the Women's Commentary, and again, it's page 87 for Women's, 123 for the Plow. Adonai appeared to him, that being Abraham, by the oaks of Mamre as he was sitting at the entrance of the tent at about the hottest time of the day. Looking up, he saw, lo, three men standing opposite him. Okay, and this is where, again, the Hebrew becomes helpful. Anashim, standard Hebrew phrase for a group of men. Okay, so what we're told so far is three men standing opposite him. Seeing them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to meet them, and bowing down to the ground, he said, "My lords, if I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, recline under a tree. Let me bring a bit of bread, and you can restore yourselves. And then you can go on. And now that you have come across your servant," as they responded, "very well, do as you propose." So Abraham hurries to the tent, to his wife Sarah, and says, "Hurry, knead 3 measures of wheat flour, bake some bread cakes." And Abraham then ran to the herd and took a young calf, tender and sound, gave it to the servant lad who quickly prepared it. He took sour milk and sweet milk, in other words, cheese, basically, and the calf he had prepared, and set it all before them. And as he stood over them under the tree, they ate. Now, this is just foreshadowing of our Torah study discussion. Is there anything that strikes you as odd about this scenario?
Did anybody cook anything?
It's treif.
What?
It's treif. Well, it's lo kasher, right? Is the here what's being described is Abraham is serving his guests meat and milk together, or at least presumed.
Oh,
So
together.
exactly, Abraham. So we'll discuss that again, as I said in Torah study. Very interesting conversation in its own right. Well, that's one way of looking at it, probably the most direct way of looking at it. But believe it or not, there are some very out there explanations as to why that's the case. But anyway, we'll get there. They then said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" "There in the tent," he replied. And one of them said, "Rest assured that I will return to you at this time next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Okay, so let's finish out there. No, Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent behind him. Abraham and Sarah were at this point old, well advanced in years. The way of women had ceased for Sarah. And so Sarah laughed inwardly, thinking, "Now that I am withered, will I have pleasure with my Lord so old?" But Adonai said to Abraham, "What is Sarah laughing so, thinking? Am I really going to bear a child when I have grown so old? Is any wonder too difficult for Adonai? At this fixed time next year, I will return to you, and Sarah shall have a son." Sarah then denied it, for she was afraid, and said, "I did not laugh." But God said, "Ah, but you did laugh." So here again is a wonderfully rich narrative that, because of the Akedah at the end, we again either sort of skip over or don't pay a lot of attention to, but there's a lot here to unpack. And as I said, Torah study will be where we really get into more of that discussion. But I want to focus more on these 3 characters a little bit, and this idea that is eventually developed to the point in which, almost like the story of Abraham and smashing the idols, or the various other midrash that have become so popular and so well known, that they become as if they're part of the Torah itself. The concept and the idea that these are not just 3 people. right? That these three people are representing God, that they are in fact what we would describe later on as angels. And from Hebrew, again, this idea of malachim, of being something, not just, this sort of image of a character with wings, but with a purpose. But the main idea of angels in our tradition is that they are functioning in some kind of way. They are part of the heavenly court. They attend to whatever it is that God needs up there. And at the same time, there are these stories in which they play into our human existence and to the stories of our ancestors. Now, as I jokingly said, but also on a very serious level, as you know, your rabbi is a litvak, which basically, if you don't know what that means, if we have one real challenge in life, it is that we can oftentimes be hyper-rational, to the point in which sort of focusing a lot on the sort of tachlis of life, the things that need to be done, and then getting into conversations about angels and things like that. Have always been a struggle for me. It's always sort of a running joke with me and Lou because, she likes horoscope things and things of that nature and reminds me constantly that I'm a Taurus and all the things that go along with it. And I always sort of rejected this stuff and I used the excuse of Avodah Zarah as my idea, right? The idea that it's worshiping stars. The reality is I just always found it strange that you could bunch people together based upon when they were born and what the stars were. And then at the same time as I've lived, I've started to learn that, at least in my case, the Taurus description is very accurate and very predictive of my behavior around many, many things. So it's one of those things I've come to sort of to accept even when I can't accept it. But the idea of angels has always been one that I think I'm in something of a minority in the sense that I never really moved to the world with that kind of concept. But if you were to have a conversation, for example, with my mother, right, this is a big part. My grandmother, right, loves this element of Judaism, this idea that not just that there are these sort of generic angels floating around, but there are specific ones in which when you need, assistance or you need guidance or you need that sort of what appears in this story, the people who appear out of nowhere, so to speak, to tell you the news you need to hear, that is very powerful, right? And it makes a lot of sense. And I could see for my mother, for my grandmother, for Lou, for other people who are of a similar kind of outlook, that it's actually deeply meaningful to consider that. So realizing that it's not my language, this is one of those times, the great thing about Judaism in general is, I don't have to be it, right? I don't have to be the single voice for all things. I can look to colleagues, I can look to teachers of ancient times, of contemporary times, who do get it and have a better way of expressing it than I might be able to come to naturally. And something that I can share with all of you, and in some ways to share with myself also, to kind of get me out a little bit of my hyper-rationality and to accept some of the real beauty here. So this teaching comes from a rabbi who I would imagine most of you are not familiar with, but in your growing lexicon of contemporary rabbis, this is somebody I'd like to put on your radar because I think for some of you it really would be somebody that you might enjoy his teaching from time to time. His name is Rabbi Zach Fredman. Does that name sound familiar to anybody? Fredman. So Fredman I knew more tangentially through my brother. He was at JTS around the time my brother was. He was doing all sorts of stuff where my nieces were going to things. He's an incredible musician and talented, in lots of different ways, and decided eventually that he enjoyed it so much that he wanted to be a rabbi. And then he started a community downtown called the New Shul. And my only real experience being at the New Shul was actually for Ike Fagan's bar mitzvah. At the time, Neil's grandson Ike was still living in the city. And so he went to this, and I went, and it was the most unique B'nai Mitzvah experience I've ever seen on several levels.
I think my son was married there.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah.
It's entirely
They're
possible.
not Jewish.
It's in Tribeca, if I remember correctly. They're not in their own building, as far as I remember. I think they were renting at the time from a public school. I think actually that they used their gym, something along those lines. But like just as an aside, to give you a sense of kind of how radically different his thinking is, but how brilliant it can be. So in Ike's case, right, normally a student gives up, a Devar Torah at their bar mitzvah or their bat mitzvah. They stand up, and it's fairly, I won't say formulaic, but it follows a pretty traditional kind of route. A little bit of what the kid says, a little bit of Torah, a little bit of commentary. Great. In this case, what he did with Ike was the exact opposite of that. He basically had a conversation with him. The two of them stood there, and I'm sure that this had been worked out ahead of time, that they'd come up with the questions that were going to be posed. But you have to picture, Rabbi standing here, right? Ike standing here, kind of shoulder on, and then literally engaging in a dialogue about the Parsha in real time. And it was radically powerful, right? It showed that, in times, there's nothing wrong with the standard practice, but sometimes there's a different way to approach it to the same end result, which is a kid who gets up in front of his community and is able to teach Torah in a way that feels natural to them. So, again, it wouldn't work for everybody, but it made me realize that this is a guy who thinks differently, and he's somebody to pay attention to from time to time, especially when I find myself in a place where I can't articulate it myself. I look and see kind of what he's doing. And he's a poet and a musician, and he just thinks and writes very differently. So here's what he wrote about these messengers, these angels, these people, these anashim as we see them in the story. He says the Hebrew word for angel is really equivalent is a messenger, a malach. There is a rule that angels only do one thing at a time, single pointed in mission. Multitasking is a false human invention, a lie of the ethos. We'll put it again where I said he's a little radical. A lie of the ethos of capitalism, value only in productivity. Okay, we'll put aside for a second broad statements about politics, but his main point is, that this idea of multitasking is a human creation of sorts. But a service of devotion gives the whole heart, her hands, her dreams, the organic singularity of a being in motion, making her gift manifest. And angels are anonymous. They have no desire for attention, only the swift accomplishment of the task. This quality of malachim, he says, of angels, of messengers, changes the dynamic of all human interaction, because anyone quietly about their business, the barista, the fire tender, the car repairer, the barber, the baker, they might all be angels on a secret mission of lofty, unknowable consequence. Right? Just let that sink in for a second. And imagine you see the world that way. It's like that, even you know about Lamed Vavniks? You know what that term, Lamed Vavnik, is? I figure Betsy's probably the only one. There is a concept, a sort of mystical concept in Judaism, that there are a exact number, 36 people at all times in the world who essentially think of Atlas holding the world up. They're basically, their righteousness is holding the entire world up, but many of them don't even know it themselves that they are the Lamed Vavniks. Nobody else necessarily knows that they are. So it became basically a way of saying when there's like a great person that you know, that you call him a Lamed Vavnik, because that's a way of sort of identifying it. But here he's talking on an even broader scale. He's saying, literally anybody that you interact with could conceivably be, right, one of these angels essentially doing whatever their predetermined task might be and focusing with all their intention. And then he goes back to our text and he says, and God appeared to her, appeared in a change of the eyes, a difference in the quality of the gaze, where before there were figures of men, now everywhere there are angels. And when they appeared, she ran to greet them, washed their feet, sat them under her tree, and served them cheese and fresh bread. Here he's playing with the story bit, right, making it Sarah instead of Abraham. And then over tea, each gave their message. And he says that each of these three, right, one came for the purpose of healing, one came for destruction, presaging the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and one told them that in the ripeness of your years, Sarah, you will bring forth a child, the future is coming through you. So there's a lot of beauty in this, a lot of things, to think about and to consider. But, the takeaways for me as reading it, again, as somebody who does not necessarily view the world in which I'm thinking of Gabriel or any of the other archangels or anything of the sort, that this way of sort of seeing the impact of angels in the world, even if it's more sort of in an indirect fashion, right? In other words, that even in the behaviors, when we focus ourselves intently on one thing, right, instead of trying to do a million things all at the same time, we're in effect trying to mimic the angels. And these are the parts of the narrative that for me actually still work, even as a hyper-rational person. It's like, even if I'm not considering the fact that an actual angel is in the room with us right now, the idea of trying to embody some of their characteristics, as we do in some of even our ritual choreography of the service, right? When we get to the Kedusha and we're bowing this way and that way and we're standing up on our toes, all of that is mimicry of what the angels are supposedly doing up in heaven. That one of the things that I've never thought of before is this idea of angels' ability or existence to be focused as opposed to be pushed out into a million different directions, is a really beautiful teaching. That one that I think we, as especially modern people, really struggle with, which is how to focus on the tasks that really matter the most, that are the most, let's say, essential, and how not to be sort of pulled into what ends up becoming such a multiplicity of things that we cease to exist, that we are basically so spread thin and so many different places and so many different times that we can't ever feel, for example, joy and celebration because some other element of ourselves is in a place of pain or suffering. And having that ability from time to time, as the angels do, to be able to sort of focus our energies in that way, I thought was really quite powerful, quite interesting, and one that I think is challenging to me, but in the best kind of way. So as I said, we'll talk a little bit more in Torah study about this section of the Torah. We'll bounce around a little bit in the portion and the Midrash and some other places. But if you're interested, his stuff generally, you can sign up for his weekly response. And as I said, some of it is really out there, and it's stuff exactly probably have to explain it to me to really understand what he's trying to say. But sometimes I open up his stuff and it's the only thing this week that I read that just made sense to me. It just connected in that way. Fancy.
Is it possible that your angel encouraged you to give us the Torah today?
I'm gonna for today, for this Shabbos, I'm gonna say yes. For this Shabbos, I'm gonna say yes. So that will be the question, is maybe you guys will tell me who it is my angel may be. I wonder. I wonder.
You
Well,
don't have to know.
yeah, no, I think actually that part of it,
Know that they're there for you,
that's the
but they
part-
change.
that's the part I grew to, I think that I've grown to accept in that way, right? Is sort of whereas maybe at some point in my life I might have had a antagonistic relationship to the idea, that I can be accepting of a sort of passive relationship to the idea, which is only positive. And I remember, again, it's like my grandmother sitting, this is my mother's mother, in their house in Youngstown, Ohio, and thinking with their angel cards and, and having these conversations with my mom, and just thinking, she's really enjoying this. This is really meaningful to her. And she really absolutely in her heart believes all of it. And, and I think just because I don't in the same way, right? As you said, Marcia, right? It doesn't matter whether at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it brings them comfort. And in the end, I myself, I think I'm growing more and more comfortable with that idea. But I think you've asked me a great intellectual question, which I can start to think about, Betsy, which is, if there was going to be an angel following me, which particular angel would be the most helpful? I think would be great. Not to save me, but to push me perhaps in better directions. So anyway, we'll read our portion in a second from the beginning of the parsha, the first 14 verses or so, page 123 in the Plout, 89 in the Women's Commentary. And in the meantime, we'll start our Torah service back in our prayer books. This is the part where I throw lots of numbers at you and hope that you remember some of them. But back in our prayer book, we're on page 362. And, Howard, you can give out our Aliyah, whoever would like it. And then you can have Gabbai for me, I hope, which would be good. And I wonder if I forgot my, no, I got it. Okay, good.
Would I be able to take your go now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be a great thing. So it's after the, no, it's definitely after an Aliyah, but well, the question is before the Aliyah or the after Aliyah. I think it's after the Aliyah, if I'm not mistaken, and it's in our prayer book. Just for those that may not know, Benchik Gomel is a wonderful thing. When a person comes through an experience that, was enough for them to really, again, take stock after and to have gratitude, it's really only that, right? It is a prayer of thanksgiving. It's on page 371 at the bottom. And so best of my memory is that normally it's when you have an Aliyah and it's tied to that.
Yeah.
The Misha Berach part of it is that in traditional environments, there's a Misha Berach for pretty much everybody that comes up for an Aliyah, which is not our general practice here. So for you, what would be most meaningful? Do it, I think, after the Aliyah to me would be the way to go. Okay, excellent. And and Benson, for that piece of it, if you want to come up to be closer to the Torah for it, if that's whatever you'd like. Okay. In the meantime, though, we're going to start our Torah service, page 362. We'll rise in body or spirit. Ein kamocha belokim Adonai v'ein k'masecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha v'chol b'chor b'chor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai le'olam va'ed Adonai Amos lo yitein Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom al harachamim eitiv ha'bertzoncha et Zion tivnei chomot Yerushalayim ki v'cha levanatachnu Isa Adoramim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ulevar Adonai Yerushalayim. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adoneinu Gadol Shemo. Alul Adonai iti unerhom Shemo yachtav. Lecha Adonai hagedula ve'hagevura ve'hatiferet ve'hanetzach ve'hahod. Kichol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. Kichol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. Lecha Adonai hamamlacha ve'amitnaseh lechol erosh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. All right, Howard, you can gabbai for me, would be great. Okay, and we'll call up Bensi for our Aliyah this morning. Yamod ben Sion ben Moshe Veshulamit la'aliyah harishona.
Baruch et Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Borach Elam Baed.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Baed. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch et Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'hayirah elav Adonai be'elonei mamrei vehu yoshev petach ha'ohel kechom hayom v'yisa einav v'yar vehinei shlosha anashim nitzavim alav v'yar Vayarot likratam mipetach ha'ohel vayishtachu artzam vayomer Adonai imna matzati chen be'einecha al na ta'avor me'al avadecha ikach na me'at mayim Verachatzu raglechem vehishanu tachat ha'etz vecha petach pahat lechem vesadu libchem achar ta'avovru ki al ken avartem al avdechem Vayomeru ken ta'aseh kasher dibarta. Vayimaher Abraham ha'ohala el Sarah. Vayomer mahari shelosh se'im kemach solet lu shi vasi ugot. Ve'el habakar rat Abraham vayikach ben bakar rach vatov vayiten el hanar vayimaher lasot oto vayikach hema vechalav ובין הבקר אשר עשה, וייתן לפניהם, והוא עומד עליהם תחת העץ, ויאכלו, ויאמרו אליו, איה שרה אשתך, ויאמר הנה באוהל, ויאמר שוב אשוב אליך כעת חיה, והנה בן לשרה אשתך, ושרה שמעת פתח האוהל, והוא אחריו, ואברהם ושרה זקנים באים בימים, חדל להיות לשרה אורח כנשים, ותצחק שרה בקרבה לאמור, אחרי ולותי הייתה לי עדנה ואדוני זקן, ויאמר אדוני אל אברהם, למה זה צחקה שרה לאמור, האף אמנם אלד ואני זקנתי, ויפלא מאדוני דבר למועד אשוב אליך כעת חיה ולשרה בן.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורה אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Okay, and the Birkat Gomel is on the bottom of page 371.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שגמל לנו כל טוב.
Amen. Mi shagamalchem kol tov, hu yigbalechem kol tov sel. Amen. May the one who has bestowed goodness upon us continue to bestow every goodness on us forever. We love you, Betsy. And thank you for doing that and for reminding us. This is a wonderful part of our tradition, really wonderful part of our tradition. So, yeah, anybody, whoever is interested in, would like to know more about what benching Gomel is, then I'd be happy to talk more about that. And thank you, Howard, as always, for your excellent gabbaying. Makes all the difference in the world. So we'll take a moment before we lift and dress the Torah to offer our Mishaberach, which is found on page 371, just right above where we just were. Mishaberach Avotenu ve'imotenu Avraham Yitzchak ve'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech et hacholim ha'elu. This morning we are thinking of Benti Tepper, Allison Luckman, Malka Bat Chaya Sura, Michael Klinghoffer, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Rivka Bat Rachel, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sylvia Devora Bat Francis, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Spicer, Barbara Kushner, David Kyle Klopman, Lorraine Davis, Talia Pomeroy, Michael Ben Hanania, Devora Batsima, Rebecca Lila Snyder, Jeffrey Miller, Shelley Lyman, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Stanley Rappaport, Karen Layton, Harold Goldban, Celia Paul, and Steve Rosen. In addition to the names that I just read aloud, if any of our friends who are with us here now would like to add some names.
I think I'd like to add our Ukrainian family, Victoria, Yaroslav, and Nikita.
Beautiful.
The two boys actually have some kind of, I don't know what, but some kind of throat thing.
Sorry to hear that. I'm sure exposure to all sorts of germs,
Yeah,
it's going to be, that's very sweet to think that way, Ellen. That's lovely. And we'll try to figure out if there's anything practically we can do for them also as well. Betsy, do you have any other names, Ellen?
what?
Any other names that you wanted to add?
No.
Okay.
that's okay.
Howard?
Yes, her.
Marcia?
Audrey Tapasky, Diane Schwartz, Mary Moore, Erica Heck, Amba, and Dan Stapleton, Vivian Trevis, Ashley and Maddie, Meredith Berger, Lenore Parker, Larry Judson, Randy D'Amico, Michael Bratz.
Of course, we'll welcome anyone that would be added either in our chat or anybody who wants to mention the names of their loved ones at home. Hakadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim alehem lachalimam l'rapotam l'chazikam b'ishlach lahem mehira refuah shlema min hashamayim refuat hanefesh refuat haguf hashtabag alav zman kariv ben Omar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored, and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let us say together, Amen.
Amen.
El Narefana La, El Narefana La, El Narefana La, Refuah Shelema, El Narefana Lo, El Narefana Lo, El Narefana Lo, Refuah Shelema. We'll rise now in body or spirit as we lift and dress the Torah, page 370 at the very bottom. V'zot Torah asher Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yadon Shem. Torah, 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 Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Okay, please be seated.
You do it better by yourself than any of us ever did.
Lots and lots and lots of practice. Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say that was after the first year of COVID. I think I had gotten pretty much everything down I could imagine. But there are a lot of similarities to dressing a Torah back to changing a child. There are many of them. So at this point, exactly. Not to draw any connection other than that, but I will just say that once a body does enough of the same motion enough times, it's like I always compare it to like the pit crew in a NASCAR race. As you see these guys, they're just working what seems unquestionably fast, and it's only because they've done the same thing so many times over and over again. Evan, good to see you. Good shows. But I appreciate your noticing that detail, though, Ellen, because these are the small things that mean actually so much to me. Anytime anybody notices something that I take great pride in, that it really means a lot. It really means a lot. So thank you for that. Also, I will note that the smaller Torah makes everything infinitely easier. That is for sure. But I will tell you, the lifting part, for when I was a kid, I always associated it with strength, not with technique, until Rabbi Wyman, who was here, and he showed me what he does. And ever since I've done it, and it's just brilliant.
You just throw it up in the air.
Yeah, well, no, so because that basically, I remember we had a guy at the Heschel School who used to be one of these guys who would lift it as far out as he possibly could. And I'm talking about like the normal size Torahs, double sized ones that he would just go straight up like this, like he was a lumberjack. And it was always the most impressive thing in the world to me. And I thought that's how it's supposed to be done. But what Rabbi Wyman does is he said it's Archimedes. It's just, and what you do is you pull the Torah halfway out. In his case, he uses a straddled stance so that he has the leverage to do it. And he pushes down to get it vertical, gets down with his legs, and then basically lifts up this way. So it's not this motion at all.
Yeah.
It's really actually your legs driving up from the ground. So it's classic Ari Weller stuff too. I feel like I should have learned it from him. That would have made a lot more sense. But okay, so we're going to read our Haftarah this morning. It's on page 149 in our Plav Chumash if you have it. If you don't, it's 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 to 37. And you'll see pretty quickly again where our connecting point is here, the focus on a woman without a son and with an old husband gives birth after receiving a divine promise delivered by a messenger, and her son is thereafter saved from death. If that sounds a little bit familiar to perhaps what we read in the Torah portion, is not accidental. This is usually the reason why we have the Haftorahs that we do. So again, we'll read there in just a moment. First, we'll offer our blessings back in our prayer books on page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nbiim tovim v'ratzav et divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo b'nbiim haemet v'tzedek. The wife of one of the prophetic disciples cried out to Elisha, saying, "Your servant, my husband, has died. You know how your servant always revered the Eternal. Now a creditor is coming to take away my 2 sons to be his slaves." Elisha said to her, "What can I do for you? Tell me what you have in the house." And she replied, "Your maidservant has nothing at home but a small oil jar." "Go outside to your neighbors," said Elisha, "and borrow as many empty jars as you can. And then you and your son shall shut yourselves in, pour oil into all these jars, and when one is full, set it aside." She went away and did this, shutting herself and her sons in. They kept bringing jars, and she kept pouring. When these jars were full, she said to one of her sons, "Bring me another jar." But he answered, "There aren't any more." And the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, who said, "Go sell the oil, pay your debt. You and your children can live on what remains." One day Elisha went to Shunem. A rich woman who lived there prevailed on him to have a meal, and from time on would stop for a meal whenever he was passing through. The woman said to her husband, "I am sure that this man who comes here so often is a holy man of God. Let's build a small room on the roof, put a bed, a table, a chair, a lamp in it, and he can stay there whenever he visits us." One day he came there and went up to the upper room to rest. He told his servant Gehazi to call to the Shunammite woman. He called to her, and she presented herself before Elisha, who said to Gehazi, "Ask her what we can do for her in return for all the trouble she has taken on our account. Can I speak on your behalf with the king or the army commander?" "I live amongst my kin," she replied. "And what can we do for her then?" said Elisha to Gehazi, who answered, "Well, she has no son, and her husband is an old man." "Call her back," he said. And he called to her, and she stood in the door. And when she had returned, Elisha said, "At this time next year, you will be holding a son in your arms." She said, "My Lord, you are a man of God, but do not delude your maidservant." But as Elisha had promised her, the woman gave birth to a son at that season the next year. The boy grew up, and one day he went out to see his father, who was among the reapers. And suddenly he cried out to his father, "My head, my head." He said to a servant, "Carry him to his mother." And the servant took the boy to his mother, who held him on her lap until noon, when he died. She took him up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, Elisha, and left, closing the door behind her. And then she called to her husband, "Send me one of the servants and a donkey. I must go to the man of God and come back." "Why go to him today?" he asked. "It is neither new moon nor Sabbath." "Don't worry about it," she answered. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Drive the donkey and get going, and don't slow down unless I tell you to." She went to Mount Carmel and found the man of God, seeing her while she was still some distance away. The man of God said to his servant Gehazi, "There is that Shunammite woman. Run to meet her and ask her whether she, her husband, and her son are all well." She told them they were well, but when she reached the man of God on the mountain, she took hold of his feet. Gehazi was about to push her away, but the man of God said, "Let her be. Her heart is bitter, and the Eternal kept it from me." She said, "Did I ask for a son from my Lord? Did I not say, 'Don't deceive me'?" He said to Gehazi, "Hurry up, take my staff and go. Do not stop to greet anyone. Do not reply to anyone's greeting. Go and put my staff on the boy's face." And the boy's mother said, "As the Eternal lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound and no sign of life. He turned back to meet Elisha and told him, "The boy has not awakened." Elisha went into the house, and there was the dead boy lying on his bed. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Eternal. And then he stretched himself over the boy, placing his mouth, eyes, and hands on the boy's mouth, hands, and eyes. He crouched over him, and the boy's body grew warm. Elisha got up, walked to and fro about the house, and again crouched over the boy. The boy then sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha called Gehazi and told him to call the Shunammite woman, and when she came, he said, "Lift up your son." She threw herself down at his feet bowed low to the ground, and then she lifted up her son and left. Yes, familiar with this story? Not familiar. Oh, this is new. This is new. Newish? Yeah, so this is actually Elisha's stories in the prophets are really all quite remarkable in this way. But this is probably the most famous story I can think of that involves him and literally, one of the, I would say, few examples of what we might describe as a resurrection of sorts, right? And so, as you can imagine, it has a significant place in both Jewish theology, but also eventually in Christian theology as well. So that's interesting. Okay, I assumed everybody knew that story. That was a wrong assumption on my part. So maybe we'll take a few minutes in Torah study. We'll talk a little bit more about it to see if we can squeeze it in. But good to know. That's why we ask those questions. Don't make assumptions about things. Very good. Okay, we're back in our prayer books, page 372 at the bottom of the page. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mekayim, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek, al ha'torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'nemihim ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת We'll turn to page 376. We'll read a prayer for our country at the bottom of the page. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. And together we say, Amen. We're now on page 377 at the middle of the page of prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim Tzur Yisrael v'go'alo barech et medinat Yisrael reshit tzmichat gulatenu. Again, Aleha bervrat chastecha, ufros Aleha sukat shlomecha, ushlach orcha v'amitcha l'rasheha, sareha v'yoatzeha. V'takneim be'etzah tova milfanecha, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam liyoshveha, v'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for those who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. And together we say, Amen. We'll turn back to page 374, very top of the page, as we conclude the Torah service. Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, ki nizkar shemo levado, odo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren li'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am keroho. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ilekach tov natati lachem torati al tazohu. Et chaim hi lamachazikim ba betom teha meusha terachem adarchei noam bechol netivoteha shalom. Ashivenu Adonai Elecha ben Hashuva Kadesh Kadesh Yameinu Kadesh Yameinu Kechem. Okay, we'll turn now to page 586 and we'll rise bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabbat. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, atet kedula le'yotzer breshit, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 591. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Now ask those in mourning, those observing yard site, to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We think of those who passed in our community in recent months. Martin Blake, Lynn Cowan, Faith Diskin, Arlene Eber, Jay Fagan, Ellen Frank, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Mark Joseph, Jane Beard Cass, Gertrude Katz, Buddy Kossoff, Elaine Krotman, Emmanuel Kiprios, Leo Leibowitz, David Lieberman, Sandra Tromberg Luongo, Norma Paulsek, Lillian Schwartz, David Semp, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Sandy Slip, Larry Wartor, Peter Weinstein, Rita Weitzman, Matthew Adams Zimmerman, and Yael Zerdar. We also mark the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Dr. Robert Auerbach, Sadie Bennett, Marion Bloom, Marshall Butler, Betty Cutler, Erwin Daniels, Richard Agosi, Hannah Elias, Florence Feinstein, Fenimore Fisher, Mildred Garner, Tilly Gasworth, Gladys Goodstone, Irving Gostin, Milton Gross, Phyllis Katz, Dora Koffler, Evelyn Lauder, Rose Lefkowitz, Sylvia Lieberman, Anita Mello, Mary Neff, Louis Rossick, Katie Rugendorf, Morton Schoenbach, Edith Schussman, Victor Siegel, Ruth Stein, Bertha Suckerman, Harry Wartor, Irvin Weller, and Claire York. Is anyone else with us this morning? St. Kaddish for anybody?
Yaki Jakobowitz.
I'll invite those at home if you have additional names to share as well. And I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598. Yid Kadal, V'Yid Kadash, Shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma Divra Chirutei, Ve'amlich Malchutei, V'chayechon U'V'yomechon, U'V'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala V'Zman Kariv V'Imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Barach Le'alam Le'almei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha brichu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom min ramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam libracha, may every one of their memories be fruitless. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. All right, Linda, good job. It's good to see you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know it's not the most obvious. Once you've done it once, then you know. But it's. I always say, I once described our temple actually prior to the construction as something of a speakeasy. You kind of had to know where it was and to know the secret password. And I love that about it. I love it's something of a different reality now. I think. Can't possibly miss it.
I did on Zoom, and then I said, I think
that's it. That you pieced it. That's even better. You pieced it together for this. That's even great. That's great. That's great. Kevin, by the way, wishes everybody a Shabbat Shalom. He's in the city because we didn't have our actual service last night, which maybe I overreacted to the storm. I thought it was going to be worse, but I don't know. I was talking to Howard was out there with his galoshes and everything was fine. Yeah, and that changed. But it was weird though. I said it was like, there is something nice about the Zoom service in its own way. Also, it was nice to kind of see everybody in that way. Yeah, I like to think though that our davening, as we were davening, it started to the sun came out, and I was thinking, boy, if this had just been a couple of weeks ago with Noah, it really would have all perfectly come together. Okay, good job, as everyone. Some announcements. First, please join us for Torah study at 12 o'clock. And all of you who are here should have time to get home and still be in front of your screens if you choose. We'd love to see you. Please join us. Everyone is welcome, of course, at 12 o'clock on Zoom. Also, a reminder, tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m., both in person and, God willing, the internet at the home works well and it will all work on Zoom. For those that knew Ellen Frank personally or knew of her work or knew her from our community or from just being out here. Zichrona livracha, she was a really wonderful, unique, remarkable woman and created many pieces of art that are truly unique. And her husband, partner, dearest friend, Steve, was kind enough to open the studio in their home in the Springs to anybody who would like to get a up close sense of her work environment was like, to see some of the works that actually I had Gesundheit. I had this privilege of being able to do it with her, Gesundheit. And it's really quite amazing. And I realized that I actually had only ever seen probably a fraction of her actual work, because a lot of it were smaller pieces, things that weren't necessarily in display, but are really quite remarkable. So anybody who wants to join in person, it's tomorrow at 10:30 at their home in the Springs. I think if you don't have the address, let me know and I can give it to you. And then the Zoom hopefully should work. And my plan is to basically have my phone function as a kind of portable camera so that I can get close up to him as he's speaking and to the shots themselves. We'll see whether I've reached too far, but I like to try to think that we can do everything hybrid if we can. So we'll give it a shot. So again, 10:30 tomorrow. Reminder coming up this week, Nina Mitzvah will be reading at 11:30 on Monday, right? Marcia? Nina Mitzvah, yes?
11:30.
11:30, good. All right, your choice. My Heschel class at 12 o'clock, Hebrew school at 3:30, social justice committee meeting virtually at 5, and then our family B'nai Mitzvah program at the same time at 5 o'clock. Wednesday, Hebrew school meets at 3:30. Reminder that this Thursday, 7 o'clock, here in the main sanctuary of the Old Whalers Church, we'll be having our annual Interfaith Thanksgiving service, which I think we have, like I said, 10 or 11 different clergy, different communities represented.
Wow.
Yeah, and then Shelley has actually put together a program we attempted a few years ago, and we're trying to revitalize it, in which we're bringing teens from our various communities together to be able to interact with this collection of clergy, to ask us questions, to get to know us, all of those good things. So that will be a closed program beforehand, but the service itself will be at 7. And then for those who choose, there'll be pie and other desserts and stuff afterwards. So most important thing is the camaraderie, and it will be live streamed on our website and YouTube. It won't be on Zoom, but it will be live streamed for those that either can't or don't feel comfortable coming in person. But if you are comfortable coming in person, it's a great, great service to come to. And especially when our community represents well, it always feels very good. My Friday class begins at 9:15. You're welcome to join anytime. Reminder also that the Women's Rosh Chodesh group has its next meeting Sunday, November 20th. And also, as I spoke about at greater length last night, you should have received an email earlier this week of a trip that's being organized led by our Social Justice Committee, which is a civil rights journey to the South, primarily to Georgia, and if I remember correctly, to Alabama. And this is a program actually that I went on. I staffed a trip when I was still an intern several years ago. I wanted to go back to do it again. And if you're curious about it at all, the best thing you can do actually is go watch the recording of last night's service, and you can hear my sermon and explanation of it all. But there is a deadline of December 15th for those that are interested in going on the trip. If you didn't get the information, you're curious about it, please email me or email the Social Justice Committee, and they'll be happy to tell you more about it. And the trip is planned for, if I remember correctly, March 30th through April 2nd. So it's a fly into Atlanta on your own on the Thursday, and then the program is Friday, Saturday, and then the morning on Sunday, and then people fly back on Sunday evening. So great program, a lot of reasons to go, but definitely if you have the time and your interest, the sermon last night will probably give you a good sense of where we're going with it. Beyond that, I think that's everything for November. I'm told there was a successful board meeting the other night, which is good.
Go see the show.
Go see the show at Bay Street, I'm told. Multiple people have said the Ruth Bader Ginsburg play at Bay Street is supposed to be quite remarkable. So I see a few faces that didn't know. I didn't know either. So, that's the great thing about Bay Street, is it's right down the street for many of us, and wonderful people doing wonderful things. So let's do Adon Olam. We haven't done it in a while. Page 625. Oh yes, Ellen, of course.
When you do your announcements, do you tell everybody about the Ukrainian family that we are sponsoring?
So yes and yes. So but so the reason, Alan, was you were on those emails was that there was a instruction, especially by Highest, which is the organization that we've worked with, that when a family comes into the new neighborhood, if everybody knows about it, there is a tendency for well-meaning people to then try to extend their well-meaning assistance, but sometimes that can be overwhelming for the family. So I was instructed basically to not announce things too publicly too quickly until that email went out. So this would be the first week where if you don't know that we have been involved in that work, certainly to say, but the reason that I didn't mention it for the prior weeks is I was told not to. That's the only reason. And I respect that. I mean, if you can imagine what it's like for, a family who's gone through what they've gone through, and then to come and be in a completely new place that even again, we're really well-meaning, smiling people coming with all sorts of things can be
It's
too much.
already like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's precisely the thing. We're a very loving congregation, which I think, with every intention is there to want to welcome and hug and all those kinds of things. But
Ron did a big story, I don't know if you saw the email from Ron Klausner.
yeah, and then actually next Friday night, the plan is actually next Friday night as part of services, he's going to talk a little bit more about, that and about what our ongoing relationship will be and how best to support
We
them.
had them at
We've
the
also-
food pantry, also there's a couple of families that come to the food pantry from.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, I
We
was,
introduced them.
no,
to
which is,
one another, so one of them spoke fairly good English. so
yeah.
We all decided.
No, it's great. And actually, as another example, right, about the things that you assume and the things that you learn, right? So everybody's assumption coming in was that they spoke Ukrainian, which of course seems like a very logical thing until you find out that they're actually from one of the regions that is under, actually, I'm forgetting if it's one of the ones that's been liberated at this point, the Nets. I don't think so. So they're still fighting there, but they've been under basically Russian occupation since 2014. And so they speak Russian primarily as opposed to Ukrainian, which again, you wouldn't know that unless there was a reason to it. But, but they're very appreciative from what I gather, and we're doing everything we can to help to ease some of the challenges of moving in. And, but it's going to be certainly an ongoing part of our community. And it's something certainly that we want everybody to be aware of and engaged with and all that. So as I said, next week, Ron was planning to speak this past Friday and then a schedule change. So next Friday night, I think will be part of our services and we'll hear more. But thank you, Ellen, for bringing it up today and to everybody who's been helping in the initial stage of it for sure. Because without that, it wouldn't have been possible. It's really amazing.
Maybe a co-op or something for everyone.
Yeah. No. Page 625, Adon Olam. Adon Olam Asher Malach Beterem Kol Yetzir Nibra Liet Nasa Bechetzo Kol Azai Melech Sheno Nibra Ve'acharei Kiflotak Kol Levado Yimloch Nora Ve'u Haya Ve'u Hobeh Ve'u Yeh Betifara Ve'u Echad Ve'en Sheni Lehamshilo Lehachbira Ve'lireshit Ve'litachlit Ve'lo Haoz Ve'hamisra Ve'u Eli Be'chayko Betzorchevni Be'et Tzara Ve'unisi Umanosli Menat Kosi Be'yom Ekra Be'yado Afkid Rufi Be'tishan Be'ahira Be'meruchi Geviati Adonai Li Ve'lo Ira. Page 604, Kiddush, will rise in body or in spirit. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinaflash, Shabbat vayinaflash, Shabbat vayinaflash, Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Hakem berach Adonai et yom HaShabbat vayikadshehu sabri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'orei b'ri hagafen. Amen.
Listen,
Okay, good Shabbos.
we
Listen,
got stuff that.
Uncle Howard's special selection here. Good Shabbos to all of our watching friends. We'll see you hopefully for
What do
Torah
you
study in
like?
just a little bit.
Feels a lot like a speakeasy.
Right? You know, I think maybe we need to lean into this idea, you know, that's, well, actually, in the new temple, we'll have quite a setup. So, you know, we can have a little, something. Good Shabbos to everybody.
So were you recording through the laptop?